Have you ever noticed a pattern in your life that made you pause and think, why does this feel so familiar? Not learned, not chosen, just familiar. Maybe it's a gift that showed up fully formed. Maybe it's a challenge that feels older than this lifetime. Maybe it's a quiet sense that some stories just didn't start with you. I'm Karen, the records keeper. I'm an Akashic Records practitioner and teacher. And over the years, I've opened the records for hundreds of people. And the one thing that I hear again and again is this: does this belong to me? Is this from an ancestor? Today I want to take you into the old Celtic world where people believed memory didn't live only in your mind, but in the land, the blood, and in the soul itself. Millennia before humans were talking about the Akashic Records, the Celts were already living inside a worldview where nothing was ever truly lost, and every soul carried memory forward through time. If that idea makes something in you lean in just a little, you're in the right place. Let's step into it together. If you wandered into the old Celtic lands and expecting peace and quiet, you might want to manage your expectations. Not because it's loud, but because it's crowded with memory. Not the kind of memory that shows up on a test or in a history book footnote. This is the memory with a personality. Memory that hangs out in the land, loiters around old stones, and occasionally taps you on the shoulder when you weren't even asking for anything at all. The Celts didn't believe memory lived only in your head. They thought that was a very modern and very limiting idea. For them, memory lived everywhere, in the land, in the blood, and in the soul. And once you really let that sink in, Celtic spirituality stops feeling mysterious and starts feeling oddly familiar. One of the biggest differences between us and the ancient Celts is how we experience time. We treat time like a conveyor belt. Past goes one way, future comes from the other, and we stand in the middle trying not to drop anything important. The Celts looked at time and said, nope, that's not how this works. Scholars of Celtic culture describe their sense of time as layered, circular, less like a straight line, and more like overlapping worlds brushing up against each other. The past wasn't gone. The future wasn't far away. Both were close enough to whisper unsolicited advice. This is why ancestors appeared so casually in Celtic stories. No drama, no fog machine, they just showed up. This is why dreams, omens, and visitations weren't considered strange. They were expected. Memory wasn't locked behind time. It wandered freely. The historian Mir described this worldview as living inside sacred time. In sacred time, events don't disappear when they're finished. They echo. They repeat. They stay available. Life isn't a straight road. It's a path you keep crossing, sometimes without realizing it's the same one. Now let's talk about patterns, because the Celts absolutely loved them. If you've ever stared at Celtic knotwork and tried to find the beginning, you already know how this goes. There isn't one, and there isn't an end either. Lines loop, twist, disappear, reappear. It's beautiful. It's mesmerizing. And it's deeply unhelpful if you like things neat and orderly. That wasn't an artistic accident. That was philosophy. Celtic art wasn't trying to decorate life. It was trying to explain it. Life was a weaving. Each person was a thread, not floating around independently, not self-made, not isolated. You were stitched into something larger, older, and ongoing. Your threads stretch backward through your ancestors and forward into generations you'd never meet. And woven into it were stories, some joyful, some painful, some very much unfinished and hoping you'd notice. The archaeologist Barry Cunliffe wrote that Celtic identity wasn't about individual successes or personal achievement. It was about belonging to a living lineage that included people, land, and spirit as one continuous system. Who you were couldn't be separated from who came before you. This is where the idea of soul threads really started to click. In Celtic thought, certain things traveled through families without instruction manuals. A natural way with animals, or a voice that could be calm or inspire, hands that knew how to heal. a restlessness that didn't seem to belong to this lifetime. And yes, sometimes a grief or fear that arrived early and stayed longer than anyone expected. These weren't viewed as defects. They weren't signals that something had gone wrong. They were inheritances. The scholar Princess Machina wrote that how Celtic myth treats memory as active and ongoing. Memory wasn't about looking back nostalgically. It was about what was still moving forward, shaping the present, whether you acknowledged it or not, which is exactly what shows up in the Akashic Records work. And memory doesn't stop with people. That would have been far too tidy. The Celts believed memory lived in place. Standing stones weren't just dramatic landscape choices. They were anchors. Burial mounds weren't meant to hide the dead. They were meant to keep ancestors close. Sacred wells weren't just water resources. They were places where memory could surface. The Irish scholar John Carey described these sites as natural meeting points where the boundaries between worlds softened, not because of fantasy magic, but because memory had accumulated there over generations. The land remembered, and people knew how to listen. This is also why exile was considered such a deep wound in Celtic culture. Being forced from the land wasn't just about losing a home. It was about losing access to memory itself. You didn't leave the soil behind. You left your story. And if you've ever felt something stir unexpectedly while walking through an old forest, or standing near ancient ruins, or visiting a place tied to your family history, you already understand this in your bones. When we step into the Akashic Records, we see the same pattern again and again. Patterns don't show up randomly. Themes don't repeat themselves because the universe ran out of ideas. Lessons return because they're woven into the soul's thread. And here's the part I really want people to hear clearly. In the Akashic Records, memory doesn't punish. It doesn't scold. It doesn't say, you should have been better. It says, this matters. It says, this is alive. It says, you're ready to meet this differently now. Just as the Celtic worldview, nothing is ever truly lost. But nothing is ignored either. Let's clear something up. Inherited memory is not a life sentence. It's not a cosmic punishment. It's not proof you did something wrong. In Celtic belief and in Akashic understanding, memory moves forward because it wants healing, resolution, or expression. You didn't inherit a pattern because you failed. You inherited it because you had the capacity to do something new with it. The thread doesn't end with you, but it can change direction with you. That's not pressure. That's possibility. So here's the question I'll leave with you. Is there a pattern, gift, or challenge in your life that feels older than this lifetime? Not something you picked up along the way, something you recognize the moment it arrives. What shifts when you stop asking, what's wrong with me? And ask instead, what is this memory trying to remind me of? You don't have to have the answers all at once. You don't even have to have the words yet. Just sometimes noticing the thread is enough to begin. And if you'd really like to explore these ideas more deeply, at your own pace and in good company, I'd love to invite you into my private community, the Record Keeper Circle. It's a quiet, thoughtful space where we explore Akashic wisdom, ancestral patterns, soul memory, and the stories that live beneath the surface of our lives, without pressure and without pretending we have it all figured out. You'll find the link below. Until then, subscribe to this channel. Be gentle with your threads. They've been traveling a long time to reach you. With light and love, and until next time, I'm Karen, the Records Keeper.